Today is World Tourism Day, a reminder that travel isn't just about where we go, but the impact we leave behind. That's what we're diving into today with Liesel van Zyl, a Go2Africa hero, to show you how your dream safari can be unforgettable for you and transformative for Africa. Every great travel journey begins with a question: where to next? And how do we protect what makes it beautiful? Welcome to the Conscious Check-In, the podcast where sustainable hospitality, unforgettable travel, and bold conservation stories collide. I'm your host, Amy Wald, and this is your Conscious Check-In. Welcome back to the Conscious Check-In, everyone. Today, as head of positive impact at Go2Africa, Liesel van Zyl, she's been helping redefine really what safari means and turning every journey into a force for conservation and community. From collaring rhinos and wild dogs under threat, to planting 1,000 trees, to funding scholarships that shape the future of Africa's youth. Her mission is bold, it's beautiful, and sure to make every traveler leave a legacy. Liesel, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Great. I love that introduction. Thank you. It's inspiring me even.
Well, good. That's our goal today, is to inspire everyone listening to book their next luxury safari with Go2Africa and really be prepared to leave a positive impact. So, Liesel, I have to start with a fun question because you're in the land of animals. I am in a little bit of a land of animals. And so I always like to start with a little animal energy. If there was one African animal that represented Go2Africa's spirit, what would it be and why?
That is a fun question indeed. Gosh, the one that comes to mind would have to be the elephant. The elephant is very much part of community, and she or he has their trunk to the ground, listening to what's happening, listening to clients, listening to what's happening in the world. And they're very much collaborators. They collaborate with the herd. I would say an elephant would be a good symbol for us as an organization.
Beautiful answer. And very, in line with the mission of you and the organization. So thank you for that. So let's get into, a lot of people really, this is a lifetime bucket list trip. I know it is for myself. The big 5 is a checklist sometimes. But how do you want to reframe that experience for a traveler planning and thinking about that as really more of a journey for connection to nature, to people, to a bigger purpose?
Great question. One I've been thinking about for quite some time. I think in some ways it is hard to get away from that hook, especially in certain contexts. But I think that we as travelers, as members of the African travel industry, I think what we can continue to do and do more of is to take stories from travelers, stories from people, stories on the ground, and just continue to inform and inspire and really show that Africa is a lot more than just ticking off the big 5.
Great answer. And said with your beautiful Afrikaan accent. I get lost in it. Sorry. I love that so much. So, you have been quoted as saying your greatest adventure can also be your greatest contribution. What do you mean by that? And can you share a story of where a guest left Africa transformed and it was like just a visible change in them?
It's a great question, Amy. I have a few that come to mind. When I started looking for our own NGO partnerships, I came across a few of our guests who, after their first or second time traveling with us and coming to Africa, they actually started their own NGOs back in the States, specifically 2 of them I'm thinking of now, and then continued to rally friends and family to join on future African safaris, as well as raising money for their NGOs. Recently, about 2 weeks ago, one of our clients reached out and they had met a young youth in Botswana. And this particular person had inspired them and had shared that he would like to become a guide one day. And this is his journey. And he's busy doing, I think he was a polar on a makoro, like a dugout canoe. And that his plan, and he was so great with the guests, but he had this bigger vision. And the guests mulled over this and they got home and they emailed us and said, gosh, is there a way that we can responsibly support making this happen? And we got a hold of our partners on the ground, and now we've enabled this guest to pay for him to do a guiding course, and that's fantastic. But I think those are very specific, and those are kind of require also, a particular monetary contribution. But I think that if a lot of our guests come to Africa thinking that Africa is one country and that they're going to come and tick off a bucket list and it's a one-time thing. But actually, I think if guests can, once they leave, a lot of them, they come for the big five and for wildlife. But when they're here, they have such a sense of place and such a sense of different people and cultures. They end up leaving with that in mind and realizing how much more breadth of diversity there is for them. So I think that deeper connection and that contribution is that every stay and every time a guest is traveling with one of our properties that we've selected, they're making an impact, whether they realize it or not. They're impacting dozens of families, and that's part of the contribution that we mention and that I speak about when we talk about that your adventure and your contribution are so interlinked.
And when you think about your goal as an organization, a human being, it is always to make an impact. So from a business perspective, it's like that is the ultimate, accomplishment, to be able to connect someone so deeply that they go home and they want to continue to make a difference for someone. That's so exciting. I love that. So, for travelers that are listening that have always had this on their bucket list, how is a modern safari really different from the old idea of a safari, just, sightings and luxury tents? Take us in to a Go2Africa safari and what that looks like.
Modern safari is still that, Amy. I think it's still about the sightings. It's about understanding different habitats and how that will attract different species. I think also the luxury tents are still part of it, with different types of accommodation, from tents to brick and mortar to sleep out decks. Food and wine is obviously a big one. So I think that the modern safari can still encompass all of that, or a degree of that to which you're interested in. But I think that what is emerging a lot more, and it's quite tough to pinpoint, but it's this profound sense of connecting to place, to people, to cultures, and being able to have a purpose through travel, and specifically in an African context, that idea of being able to, when you travel with us, connect with different cultures, or pack something in your suitcase that you can contribute while you're traveling, or have your children. We had a guest recently who had 3 children, all at different ages and stages, and he wanted them all to visit a different school that was age appropriate, and to be able to see what it's like to be in school at that age in a different country. So I think be curious, and we tailor, we really do tailor the safaris to your interests. And if you wanted to go and do some research conservation and feel like, for you, Amy, you said you're so passionate about that, that would be something that I would say absolutely. But for other people, they want to maybe go. I was recently on a immersive day trip in the Kruger with some colleagues, experiencing something we want to share with our guests. And my one colleague, we did some gardening and some planting at a school, and she said, you can leave me here the entire day. It's great that we picked herbs and vegetables. It's great that we went and helped weave some baskets. It's great that we did this. It's great that we did tracking and we helped anti-poaching units, but you can leave me in the garden. And it just reminded me that all of us have got different interests. And I think to be able to marry your skills and your interests whilst on travel makes it that much more special and meaningful.
And so you can really do all of it, right? So if you wanted to, I mean, not all of it. We don't have, all the time in the world, but I'm saying, within that time that they're traveling with you, if they did want to do research, if they did want to enjoy the luxury part of it and some pampering and seeing animals, you can really tailor all of that to the guest and what they're looking for.
We can. I think the most helpful thing as a guest, though, is to let us know as soon as possible. We had another guest who had booked their entire safari, and a few weeks leading up to their trip, they wanted to have all of these immersive experiences, and they were particularly going to Namibia. Namibia is a vast country, and so we could make it possible, but had we known earlier, we could have made it even better. So, I mean, if you haven't said anything early on, say something still. But the earliest that you can convey, you don't know, not everyone knows what they want, but you know who you are. You know what you enjoy. You can absolutely with confidence share that and then leave that stitching and kind of creating of that safari to the experts.
I think that's a really great tip for the travelers listening here, that if you really want to get the most out of your time, of course, you can just wing it, right? And let you plan everything. And that's one way to do it. Absolutely. But another way is if you really want to tap into those true interests of yours, jotting those down for your experts at Go2Africa, and then maybe doing a little bit of research on, some things that you didn't know about Africa and trying to marry those two and then letting you plan the most perfect safari.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be all perfectly planned initially. I mean, the nuts and bolts, the skeleton of the trip obviously needs to be. But if you're interested in, many times, if you're interested in conservation research or you're interested in planting or gardening, we can then select the properties and the experiences but once that work for you. But once you're there, you're having at least 3 nights in every place.
So Liesel, tell us about, you said you spend 3 nights in different places. And I think for a lot of people, even myself, that haven't really experienced a safari, what does that mean? I mean, what are those places? Are those places that travelers specifically choose? Do you choose the itinerary? And, is that to see the big 5, or what does that exactly mean?
Gosh, that's a very big question. And that is pretty much the basis of our entire business, but it's a great one. It's a great one. I mean, what that means is sometimes we'll have clients coming to say, we've heard about this hotel or this lodge. We've heard about Zambia. We've heard about Victoria Falls. Heard about the Kruger. We've heard about the Delta. We've heard about the migration. Sometimes they've heard about things they've seen on Nash Geo. Sometimes they've heard from their neighbors. Essentially, what we try to do with that is we try to unpack. I remember somebody once asking a client, what's your picture? What's your picture of Africa? What do you see? What are you seeing in your mind? What is that? What is that sense? And for some, it's these vast plains. For others, it's kind of walking and smelling. For others, it's just the idea of the vehicle. For others, it's, there are many different ideas. We have many guests that come and they have a particular animal that they want to see. Giraffes are very popular. Elephants are popular. Obviously the big 5 too, but we have people with special interests and or they just have this idea from something, whether it was a cartoon or a documentary or a book. And what we try to do is we have this vast collection of knowledge of all of our parks and reserves and properties. And it's kind of a fun game that I like playing too. Sometimes someone will come to me and say, where's the best place for giraffe? Or my client wants to see wild dog. Where can they? Or where's the best place to take kids on safari? Or where's the, almost like you could throw pretty much anything at us. And then we have such an array of properties and reserves that we can help to then connect those dots and stitch that together. And what we would normally do is we start with a client's kind of time that they've got. How long have you got? 2 weeks, 10 days, 3 weeks? We're seeing a lot of people traveling for longer. What's your idea of budget? Are you traveling just as a couple, as a family? Is it a special occasion? We'll try and understand that, and then getting into a little bit more of the detail, and then tailor some options around that.
I really want to talk about, traveling to Africa and booking a safari with you. What does being a B certified corporation have to do with the way that you operate? And why is it important for Africa's economy that we do take these trips? Maybe it wasn't always on your bucket list, but you kind of thought it was something maybe you wanted to do. We can encourage travelers to understand how important it really is for the economy to travel there, to take a safari, and to do it with a company that is B certified.
There's actually such a small percentage of people in the world who are traveling to Africa. And so I think those who know about Africa can kind of have an understanding. But I think for the vast majority, I guess it's most of us about any other international areas, but Africa specifically is starting to gain a lot more attention on the world map of global biodiversity. And there are a lot of critically identified ecosystems in Africa specifically that are vital to mitigating climate change, vital to the future of biodiversity balance and regenerating a kind of nature. And obviously within Africa, we also have huge populations. And so that conversation and the connection between nature, biodiversity, people, communities, and how travel can really be a force for good is a really beautiful, inspiring story. And I think for guests to travel to Africa, to know that if they're if they're making wise choices and traveling with an organization, company like Go2Africa or a lodge like Asilia Lodges, who have taken the time to become B Corp certified, or there are several other globally recognized certifications. That does take time. And what those certifications do is they enable an audit. So they enable a set of questions, and they range from sustainability questions, reusing, recycling, to people, employee satisfaction questions, to impact questions. They're quite diverse. And what they do is they audit you, and then there's a minimum kind of criteria that you have to meet in order to become certified. But then what I love is what they do thereafter is they then give you, and in B Corp's case, 3 years to say, okay, well, the next time we come to revisit this, we want to see what has grown and what has moved. So it allows you to identify the areas that you are doing well in, identify the areas you're not, but then also be able to make a plan to then close those gaps. So it's a continuous journey. And I think that's what's inspiring, and it's important. Yeah, I mean, I'm getting distracted with the question, but I think from a client's point of view, and it's the same when we're selecting our lodges and properties, it really does make it so much easier for the clients if you see somebody has been accredited by a globally recognized sustainable and impact brand or accreditation, because then you don't have to do as much research. It allows you to trust and know that there really is accountability and trust and a commitment to ongoing growth.
And you hit it on the head. It's about trust and confidence, because not all travelers, and that's fine. Not all travelers are thinking about the difference they're making or conservation. Travel is travel. A holiday, everyone deserves a holiday. And so they plan it. And so this way, if that isn't your number one motivator, you can still take that holiday and know that you don't have to connect the dots, do all that back end research, you can have trust that the company is
Yeah.
doing the right thing.
And I think for anyone who is listening, and any future Africa travelers or existing Africa travelers, I think one thing I've said before is just ask the question. Ask
Yeah.
whoever you're dealing with, how does my dollar benefit where I'm going? You'll very quickly either get an answer, and it'll be an answer that makes sense, or you'll just not get an answer. And so
Yeah.
I think even if it's great, how is my dollar, how is where I'm staying making an impact to the communities and the land around them? So yeah.
That's a very simple way
Yeah.
to, yeah, I love that, to tell people, whether they're traveling to Africa or anywhere else in the world, to ask questions if they do have a question or they're unsure of the credibility of the organization. Because now, as consumers, we have such an opportunity to change the plight of a place based on where we spend our money. And so
Yeah.
it's so important to become more, have that habit become more common. So,
Amy, sorry,
no.
just we hadn't spoken about this, but just on that, I think sometimes guests, or there's sometimes a perception that you are going to be visiting an eco camp that maybe has kind of a eco bathroom, or will maybe be a little bit uncomfortable, and I think I just want to encourage anyone listening. You said something just now that made me think of this. You can still have the safari or the holiday of your dreams. You can absolutely, you do not have to compromise at all. We're not talking about this is a great safari and then this is another one that has a good impact. We're talking about leaders in the safari industry who have the most exceptional camps and most exceptional track record in making a difference. It doesn't have to be an either or, and it doesn't have to be something that's maybe that sounds a little bit kind of hippie, or so we can do that too. But yeah, you can still have the safari of your dreams, but just by choosing kind of the most responsible organization and properties, it will have a greater impact.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think this is the perfect example of why Go2Africa is really, really redefining the luxury safari space. You don't have anything taken away from you, and you still have elevated food and accommodations and experiences, and the peace of mind knowing that you are traveling with a responsible, fee certified company.
Yeah.
Great point. So, you talk a lot about the way you vet your partners, building on that B certification and really intentionally going after partners that are sustainable as well. Can you tell us what does that look like? I know that you've already vetted 80%. Your goal is 100. When you decide who makes the cut, what are you really looking for in a partner?
That's a beautiful question. So we vetted 100% of them now, and
I'm sorry. Okay.
we've audited all of them. There are two auditing mechanisms. The one we're doing research, that's manual research that we've completed. The other is a very particular survey that we've sent out, and that we haven't finished, or it hasn't been completed by everybody. But what we're looking for, when I started the survey, I looked at kind of globally recognized, like GSTC recognized accreditations, to see how we could match the most useful questions. And a lot of the lodges and camps that I spoke to they do get asked about sustainability. So this is a really important journey for any operator or organization, is to understand your supply chain, as well as for any lodge, as well as for any hotel. And we have researched all of our suppliers, and we're interested in sustainability, reuse, recycle, but we're also interested in the treatment of people, and how many employees are local, how much of the business is going back into benefiting local communities, as well as the environment. So there's a strong piece that's formed our own impact agenda that we're inviting and looking for in partners is more than sustainability, which is wonderful and has to be the start. But how are you regenerating? How are you tipping the scale to make a positive impact? So, and that we look for really in particular projects, active projects that hotels and lodges will have both within the conservation space, the conservation sphere, to increase biodiversity, as well as with communities. How are people in your area benefiting from
Mhm.
tourism and from this particular park or reserve? Because if the communities are not benefiting and not seeing benefit from this, they won't be custodians. They won't be future custodians. And there's a lot of human wildlife conflict that happens between in the borders and in the corridors between the parks and between the communities. Elephants may go out and raid crops. Lion may get out and raid livestock. And so there really needs to be a kind of a lot of collaboration around supporting communities to mitigate those instances, but also ensuring that they're seeing the benefit themselves of whether they're employed through the industry or whether they're seeing other benefits from green economies or blue economies.
Such a great point. And I think for, us, of course, that live in the United States and we don't live in these incredible, wild places where that's just a natural part of life. Think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's the difference of seeing these animals as a nuisance versus seeing them as a part of, right, a bigger picture. How are they going to benefit from these animals being here? And so using best practices to help avoid those kinds of conflicts.
We have two really beautiful, really inspiring NGO partners that we work with. And the one focuses on, they've got what they call an elephant aware economy. And so there's this beautiful synergy between supporting locals to mitigate particularly elephants raiding crops, like I was saying just now, and that might be through bees or through trellis fences. What they do is this particular NGO will also encourage and empower and really facilitate communities to develop crafts or to develop elephant friendly, wildlife friendly honey, and then we're starting to kind of help them get that into the lodges so that that can be a growing economy. So they really can be such a beautiful synergy and collaboration, but you have to work together. And the lodges have got the biggest the biggest opportunity, but also the most pressure, right? But there are some incredible stories of success that are that anyone can look at modeling suitable to the context of their area.
And I think that it's really not any different than when you just anywhere in the world, if people aren't supported and brought into the conversation, as you were saying, they're not going to be stewards of the environment, which in turn degrades any tourism destination. So I think it's important if you're for our business listeners out there, it's so important to get in collaboration with your destination, and talk about how can we make this a positive, something positive for the entire community. So,
And
just a
I
little
think,
takeaway for others out there.
yeah, and I think something that I'm kind of lenses that I'm looking at this conversation through, and that we're starting to introduce to our guests through our newsletters, is when you visit a park or a reserve, you will often fly into that area. You'll see animals all around you. You'll have a beautiful lodge, and you may fly out. You may not see communities. You may not have a sense of kind of what's outside of those parks. But when you look at the kind of the map of Africa, and then you look at the ecosystem and then the park, the majority of wildlife, many of the parks and reserves in Africa are not fenced. And the majority of wildlife is actually is actually outside of the parks, which means that they're commuting through communal areas. And I find that fascinating. And I think to kind of lift up your gaze a little bit and see your amazing safari in the Kruger. But if you just had to pretend you were in a helicopter, or you had to walk outside for, a few hundred kilometers, that you would bump into people and crops and livestock and farms and suddenly a wild dog. And like, there's this whole world that's happening outside of just that park. And I think that's the bigger picture that we're looking at. And don't worry, you don't have to worry about that. We're looking kind of at that for you. But that's part of this conversation that we're starting to introduce a little bit more.
And that's, again, regardless of where you are in the world, I think it is tourism's responsibility, right? To take that lead, take the pressure off of the guest and lead them to make responsible decisions because you've inspired them to do so. And then take that back home. And then we all have a beautiful world where we live with butterflies and nothing else.
Absolutely. I mean, I live and breathe this, but when I travel, I travel because I want to take a break and I want to enjoy and I want to explore. We all have different, I don't want to feel burdened on my travel. I want to be going out for a walk or going for a drive. And I remember going on a drive in a particular area in Zimbabwe. And we'd spent 2 or 3 days with this gentleman as our guide, and we had a good rapport. And then the one day we went in to go and help build a cattle boma. So we wanted to get our hands dirty. We went in there, and as we were driving through, this man was being greeted by everybody in this community. And this man was so well, he was so educated and just so, he came across so beautifully, that I'd never imagined that he'd come from this incredibly remote village. It turned out he was from this remote village. And it was such an eye-opener for me to realize that this individual had grown up with access to, natural water, borehole water and fishing and livestock to eat and all of that. But here he was hosting us at this luxury lodge. And it's incredible when you see those dots connecting.
If you've ever dreamed of an African safari, the kind where every single moment feels like it was designed just for you, Go2Africa is the team to make it real. From the second you land, every detail is tailored to your heart's desires. Whether that's tracking elephants at sunrise, sipping wine under the stars, visiting a village, or simply soaking in the quiet of the bush, your journey is completely yours. And the best part, while you're living out the luxury safari of your dreams, you're also giving back, supporting conservation, empowering communities, and protecting the wildlife that makes Africa extraordinary. Start planning your tailor-made safari at Go2Africa.com. That's Go2Africa.com. So let's talk about the food and drink. That's an important part of a traveler's holiday or vacation, memorable part. What is one dish or flavor or drink, I know, but that every traveler should really experience on safari? One maybe that really roots them in, the fact that they are in Africa.
Amy, I love this. Your questions are so original and fresh, and I've not been asked this before. I think what comes to mind is you obviously have barbecues in the States, but kind of an African barbecue, al fresco, or kind of that smoky flavor, there'll often be a selection of meats and veg and salads, but there'll be a side dish. There'll always be a couple of side dishes of what we call, there'd be African spinach, which can be quite bitter, but is often mixed with peanut butter from local peanuts or mixed with some kind of like naturally grown tomato sauce. So an African spinach, and then something known as ugali, which is like a pap or a sadza. It's a staple dish made from maize, so from corn flour. And it's cooked to quite a kind of stiff dough-like consistency. And actually in the communities, they use that to eat their food with. But when you're at a boma or barbecue evening, you can just have that as a side dish and eat it with your knife and fork. And I think for that, when you're driving past the fields of corn and local veggie patches, you can just be reminded of that smoky goodness from Africa.
Oh, I love that. And, for the non-meat eaters, that's a great example of being able to really take part in the local cuisine and not feel like you're missing anything, right?
Do not worry, there is plenty of meat also for the carnivores. But exactly. But meat is expensive, and in Africa it's very much a often meat would really be in the local cultures and communities would very much be kind of only eaten on a really special occasion. And
Oh,
so
okay.
when you're on safari, you'll have several meat options as well as veggie and gluten free and all kinds of options. But yeah, the sadza, the ugali and the African spinach is really a staple in African homes because it's so easily grown and really is eaten every day.
Gosh, that's what I just really love about travel is something that we coming to a new area is a new adventure through food and a delicacy and yet can be a staple for someone else. And it's just such a great way to share someone's, everyday life
Yeah. I
and
mean,
explore
our
new.
coffee and tea is also really phenomenal. We make really good tea and coffee throughout Africa. We've got incredible tea and coffee plantations and all different kinds of flavors. So I'm not sure how big coffee culture is for you, but it's huge in Cape Town. And when you're going and visiting a lot of the lodges, especially in East Africa and in Malawi, you could visit tea estates and coffee plantations and try that as well. So that's also something.
It's funny, and coffee is everything. It's why I couldn't get up in the morning if it wasn't for it. It's a horrible thing to say, but when you talk about that picture in your mind of what Africa is, everybody has that different picture. I picture like those early mornings with the dew coming up. And those old pictures where people were wearing the Brits were wearing those, white hard brimmed hats and a really like hot, steamy cup of coffee. I don't know.
Love
That's my
that.
visual of it.
I'm
Yeah.
already starting to paint a picture of what your trip would be just based on that.
Then some wine at night.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So, there has been a lot of conversations up through the past few years and up until now talking about nature-based hospitality and tourism and nature-based luxury. For me, it's really kind of luxury reimagined. And again, not giving up anything, but maybe adding new definitions of them and new perspectives. So, since luxury is evolving, even here in the States, everywhere in the world, it's not always about kind of what we thought. What does that nature based luxury look like in Africa on a safari? We kind of touched on it, but maybe we could expand on that a little bit for those people out there that are like, this is a luxury vacation for me. What
Yeah.
does that look like?
It's very much rooted in a low volume, high impact model.
Yeah.
And obviously you have that all over the world, but it's is increasingly common in Africa, but not that common, right? Because it's low volume. But really where the model is about having less beds, lower impact on the environment, that has really the environment and the community at its forefront. And what that allows, so that's important on its own, even if the experience
Yes.
wasn't amazing. But what that ends up doing is it ends up giving the guests more privacy, more personal attention, less vehicles at sightings. Because of that, there's also more personal attention. Often they're quite remote. So that means you're generating more employment. You have more personal relationships, more attention to detail. Yeah. And then I think also with that, there's obviously a big move to kind of have more of a farm to fork dining. So kind of having local supply chains and having local coffee or local veggie gardens. So I think within that, when you have that space and you start to understand your sense of place and how you can have an impact in your environment, that also becomes important. And guests would have that have still the best guides and the best chance of seeing animals, and they'd have luxurious rooms, but they'd know that they don't have as much plastic, if not any plastic. And They'd know that the food that they're eating is so good, but it's also been sourced locally and ethically. And they'd know that their guide has probably come from a line of kind of, he may be the first generation or the second generation to kind of be getting into tourism and really seeing this benefit from tourism and benefiting the rest of kind of his community. So I think on the surface, that luxury could look quite similar. But if you had to scratch below the surface, you'd really see a conscious choice to reduce the impact and the negative impact and increase the positive impact. And that for me also really increases the experience, right? If you're
Yeah.
interested in that, if you're not interested, that's fine. But if you're interested, it kind of just adds so many layers to the experience and so many opportunities for conversation as well.
Absolutely. So, Go to Africa is part of the Nawiri. Is that how you say it?
It
My
is.
Ohio accent.
It means to
Sometimes
thrive in
to
Swahili.
thrive. Okay. So they're part of that group. You're bringing together NGOs, communities, lodges. Can you share a partnership example with us of how you are really, we've talked a lot about the impact that you're making, but in practicality, what does one of those partnerships look like?
If we dial back a few years and we look at kind of the impact that our organization made through profits in tourism, that's one thing. But then you start to look at kind of a group of lodges like Asilia Camps and Lodges in Kenya and Tanzania, and you see that every single one of those lodges is making an impact through people, through the particular park or reserve they're in. That increases the impact. Then you start to attract like-minded travelers who are now increasing that impact. But then what's happened in the last few years is we've also attracted philanthropic investors who now want to see that they want to be able to also be part of kind of changing the future. And so that then makes it bigger. And then something else that we've focused on is not to be doing this ourselves. We're not an NGO. We're a travel business who loves what we do. We love creating African travel safaris. But when we're partnering with NGOs that are locally based on the ground and they have relationships with the communities, they understand the context of species that are under threat. And then we're partnering with them. And that means that impact is just becoming kind of not just wider, but also deeper, but in a very strategic way that is looking to long-term impact. So when you ask about kind of how does the Nawiri group bring all of those together and how does that make a difference? It really does. It's not just $1, but it's $1 that's now times by kind of 10 in the right direction.
When you think about that philanthropic now investor that's coming in, do you think that that is because the world is starting to take notice how important the plight of Africa is, the biodiversity, the extended reach that the ecosystems on Africa's continent affect all of us?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. It's becoming a global conversation. And there are millionaires and billionaires who realize that they have influence. And what better place to influence than something that's going to really potentially assist us in tipping the scales back to kind of a regenerative world?
How would you say then you balance scaling that impact that we're discussing at a business level, but keeping the guest experience deeply personable, resonating with them, fulfilling all of those dreams and fantasies of Africa at the same time, where they don't feel like they are in they're volunteering, or they're for those that aren't looking to volunteer, or they're not in a business conversation? How do you balance that?
I think that is a great question and one that we have contemplated quite a lot in the last few years. There was a lot of change that happened through COVID and after COVID, especially in the travel sphere and many spheres. But a lot of businesses, they either made it or they didn't. They either had investors who were just looking at the economics, or they had investors who were also looking at kind of meaningful impact. So there's been quite and this is more of a kind of a B2B perspective, but there's been quite a shift, and it's really interesting. And I think where we find ourselves is we're in this fortunate position where we have the opportunity to make a bigger impact. But as you say, how do we still provide expertise and tailored service and ensuring every guest feels special? And if there's one word I can come up with, it's people. It's people, Amy. I mean, we've got an entire team who are looking at AI. We're very strong on tech. We've got a massive tech development a part of our business. But people, relationships, we thrive on having relationships with each of our business partners. When our guests are traveling, they're building relationships with people on the ground. Our leadership team undergoes kind of training that speaks to how to care for our people better. We've built out our customer facing team who are just dedicated to now making sure that they're basically a concierge team, that when guests are traveling, they actually don't have anything else that they're doing at that time other than focusing on the guest. And so, yeah, I think it's possible, but it requires good people, investments in people, and just such a focus on people both within the organization and outside.
So what I hear you saying is you have a really great culture.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Because honestly, regardless of the kind of organization you are, but especially in hospitality, that culture always translates to the guest experience if it's there.
Yeah, and we then partner with properties and lodges who align to those values, and the same with the NGOs. We speak to each other often, monthly. We're in conversations with the NGOs, with the partners, and our values are aligned. And as you say, that really then resonates with the guests, but is increasing the impact at the same time.
Yeah, it's such a win-win. Liesel, you've said Africa is the North Star for, global biodiversity, even societal health. We've kind of touched on that a little bit now and how important people are on a bit. What can really the rest of the world learn from Africa's model of travel and tourism, conservation, and community? What would you say to people out there that maybe have never thought about taking a trip to Africa, or those that are planning it, and really just how important it is to spotlight this region of the world?
I think what others can take from this, from kind of our model, is really working together. I think that's the crux of it, and can be modeled anywhere in the world. Working together, being ruthless in kind of your values and aligning your values to those who you're working with. And in our context, and I think this is a global context too, is ensuring that there is this people and task focus. It's not all people and no profits. It's not all profits and no people. It's not all conservation and no communities. It's not all communities and no conservation. It's balancing, or at least it's working together. And what do we want Africa to know? What do we want travelers to know about this being important? I think for the most travelers, they're just excited to come and visit Africa. And I think that's, let them be excited. Be excited. Build your dream trip. Have a conversation. Start a conversation. Be curious. Ask how it's going to make a difference. Share what in you is important. What for you is purpose. And share that so that we can kind of enable that safari to be something that is a lifelong adventure and a dream come true, but one that can really fulfill a deeper sense of purpose for you personally.
Because it does translate personally, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes we get so far off of what travel and tourism really is supposed to be about. And it's supposed to be about connection and how it changes you personally. Not to get
Yeah.
really philosophical, because it is still fun and adventurous and exciting. To me, that's the foundation. And I would think most people in the industry would say the same. So, Liesel, if you look ahead 10 years, what role do you really foresee Go2Africa playing in shaping the future of Africa's travel and biodiversity?
I would love to see that we were critical in starting and building on a conversation, continue a conversation around choice, around how our business can have a positive impact, aligning to those with similar values, encouraging each other to start this journey and encouraging each other to make a difference. We know wildlife encounters, people, guides, hosts, having a sense of place. Those are incredible. But I think what would be wonderful is in the to look back and to go, I had the most incredible safari, but gosh, what I wasn't expecting is how much of a difference that we made, and that every single trip is positively impacting a dozen families, and is part of really this bigger regenerative conversation within a global context.
Great answer.
I don't know.
All right. So, as we wrap up, as someone who was raised in Africa, your life spent there, what do you think one misconception about Africa that you really wish travelers would finally just leave behind?
Great one. That Africa is one country. That it's one country, that it's quite small. You can fly into one place and kind of access everything, and you really only need a week and you would basically get to see everything. And actually there's so much more. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, I have visited all of the Southern and East Africa countries, and they're all unique. The habitats are unique, the activities are unique, the people are unique, the people are unique, the languages are unique, and therefore the wildlife is unique. They're all unique. So I'm not sure if that's inspiring or not, because that means that now that bucket list is not going to be. But I mean, that's even more important to kind of have that picture in your mind. What is that
Yeah.
picture? Because there are quite a few different versions of Africa, and different ones will suit different people based on kind of what they enjoy or what they picture. But that's the main one, to understand that there's a lot more depth, and to give us as much information, give your agents as much information as you can, so that we can help to craft something that really suits you and your personality and your group and family.
Okay, so one last closing question. Sustainable travel and tourism matters because
If you're not traveling sustainably and responsibly, you're actually causing damage. You're actually going backwards. If you're not stepping positively and forwards and sustainably, you're actually causing harm.
I'm going to start putting out fireworks. That was an incredible answer and simple and to the point. Beautiful. Liesel,
Yeah.
where can people go to book their next incredible bucket list African safari with you?
Please, they can go and visit our websites, www.go2africa.com. They can learn about the different countries. They can learn about different kinds of safaris, from romantic honeymoon to family. They can learn about a selection of trips I've put together, which are called trips with a purpose, which are more immersive. There is an ocean of beautiful content that they can really kind of sit and explore over the weekend or an evening, and then pop us a message and say, I love this picture, I love this idea, oh, I love that, this is what I'm interested in. And somebody will get in contact with you. One of our team, who are sitting all over Africa, will get in contact with you. They can email you, they can jump on a call like this, on a WhatsApp call, text, whatever works for you, and really have a conversation about putting something together for you.
And make that vision board literally become a reality, right?
Yes. Love that.
Yeah. Liesel, this has been such a pleasure. I am so grateful for the work that you and your team are doing for Africa and the planet. And I can't wait to give you a big hug when I see you in 2026. And thank you for spending your morning with me.
Thank you, Amy. It was wonderful to spend time with you again. And congratulations on where you've come with the business. I love this new storyline that you have. I think it's so important, and I think it's emerging more and more, as you said, like a white space. There's definitely opportunity for conversation, and for inspiring and informing guests and travelers. And so thank you for sharing and creating this platform for this wonderful message.
Thank you very much. That was your Conscious Check-In. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and let us know who you'd love to hear from next. Until next time, travel deeper and stay inspired.